When plans quietly break. Have you ever felt like you were doing everything right, but life still slowly slipped out of your hands? Not in a loud, dramatic way. No big fight. No big failure. Just small things going wrong. A sentence that lands wrong. A look that doesn't return. A dinner that feels longer because no one talks. This video is about a week like that in my life in the United States. A week where my marriage, my family, and even my English practice all quietly went off plan. And maybe, somewhere in this story, you will hear your own thoughts. Last week, I woke up to a very American morning. Blue sky. Clean streets. Everything looked calm. But inside, something felt heavy. Your brain is very good at this trick. Outside looks fine. Inside, too many tabs are open. You still go to work. You still smile a little. You still say, "I'm fine." Maybe the most common English sentence in the world. And also the least honest that my wife and I had planned that week carefully. Daily routines. Family time. Even small notes like, talk after dinner, or walk together. It looked perfect on paper. Honestly, it looked like one of those study plans people make for learning English. Clear goals. Good timing. Strong motivation, and then real life arrived. Quietly. Politely. And bent everything point. One night, we sat at the dinner table and said almost nothing. No argument. No anger. Just silence. The kind of silence that makes you ask yourself, is this okay? When there is silence, your brain doesn't rest. It fills the space. In psychology, this is called negative interpretation bias. When you don't know what something means, your brain often chooses the worst meaning. That feeling was very familiar to me. It was exactly like listening to English. You open a podcast. You understand the first few sentences. Then you miss one part. And your brain says, stop. This is not for you. No one tells you to quit. No one stops you. But your motivation slowly walks away. That I live in the US, but some days I feel like I don't fully belong. English is everywhere, but it doesn't always enter my heart. Marriage can feel the same. You sit next to each other, but your thoughts are in different lanes. The brain doesn't care if the problem is big or small. When something doesn't go as planned, it reads it as danger. And its response is simple: make you tired. Neuroscience explains this very clearly. The human brain does not like long effort without fast rewards. When you study English and don't see quick progress, your brain reduces interest. When you try in a relationship and don't feel warmth right away, your emotions pull back. It's not weakness. It's biology. That week, I started asking myself a hard question. Am I trying too hard in the wrong way? In my marriage, and in my English practice, am I forcing a plan instead of listening to the moment? Maybe slow is not failure. Maybe slow is information that a broken plan is not always a bad sign. Sometimes it means you are using an old map on a new road. And in America, where roads are long and straight, I slowly learned that turning the wrong way is not the end. Sometimes, it's the beginning that I and the end. Life was not working against me. My brain was just asking me to stop controlling everything, and start feeling what was actually happening. A marriage under pressure. Pressure rarely announces itself. It doesn't knock on the door and say, "Hello, I'm here to test your marriage." It shows up as small delays, tired faces, and conversations that never quite start. That week in the US, pressure didn't come from one big problem. It came from many tiny ones stacking quietly, like unread emails in your brain that my wife and I were not fighting. That's the strange part. From the outside, everything looked stable. We paid bills. We cooked dinner. We asked the normal questions. How was your day? But the answers became shorter. Fine. Okay. Busy. Safe words. Emotional seatbelts. You use them when you don't want to crash into something deeper. Marriage under pressure feels a lot like speaking English when you're tired. You still know the words. You still know the grammar. But forming sentences feels heavy. You pause more. You choose simpler expressions. Not because you can't do better, but because your energy is low. Emotional fatigue and language fatigue live very close to each other in the brain. There's a concept in psychology called cognitive load. Your brain can only carry so much at one time. Work stress. Cultural differences. Financial planning. Family expectations. When the load gets too heavy, something has to drop. And often, what drops first is connection. Not love. Just connection. One evening, my wife said something very simple. She said, "You feel far away this week." Not angry. Not accusing. Just a fact. That sentence stayed with me. Because it was true. I was physically present, but mentally elsewhere. Thinking about responsibilities. Thinking about the future. Thinking about whether I was doing enough. Thinking. And listening less. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Pressure doesn't break relationships by force. It breaks them by distraction. When your attention is split too many ways, the person in front of you slowly feels invisible. The same thing happens when you learn English without focus. You listen, but you don't really hear. The sound enters your ears, but your mind is busy translating fear. Research shows that emotional safety in relationships depends less on big romantic gestures and more on small moments of attention. Eye contact. A pause. A real response. These are called microconnections. They sound small, but they regulate the nervous system. Without them, stress hormones stay high. You become defensive. Quiet. Withdrawn. That week, I noticed my body reacting before my thoughts. Tight shoulders. Shallow breathing. Short answers. These are classic signs of chronic stress. And here's something interesting. Studies show that when stress is high, language processing becomes less flexible. That means both love and English become harder to express under pressure. You don't lose ability. You lose access. That I realized something important. I was trying to be efficient instead of present. Efficient husband. Efficient learner. Efficient adult. But efficiency is cold. Relationships need warmth. Learning needs curiosity. Neither survives well under constant pressure. So I tried something different. Not a big talk. Not a solution. Just slowing down. Sitting longer at the table. Letting silence exist without escaping into my phone or my thoughts. Saying one honest sentence instead of 5 polite ones. Simple English. Simple feelings. Pressure doesn't disappear when you notice it. But it changes shape. When you name it, it stops pretending to be something else. That week taught me that marriage doesn't break because people stop loving. It strains because people stop breathing together, and maybe, just maybe, pressure is not a sign that something is wrong. It's a signal asking for less force and more presence. English and emotional fatigue. Emotional fatigue doesn't feel dramatic. It feels dull. Like trying to listen through a wall. That week, I noticed something strange. The more tired I felt in my marriage, the harder English became. Not the hard words. The easy ones. Simple listening. Simple speaking. My brain resisted even opening an English video, the same way my heart resisted starting a real conversation. This is where many people misunderstand motivation. They think they are lazy or undisciplined. But science tells a different story. When emotional energy is low, the brain enters protection mode. It avoids anything that feels demanding, unfamiliar, or risky. And English, especially speaking English, feels risky. You might sound wrong. You might feel small. So the brain quietly says, not now. That week, I sat in my car in a parking lot, listening to slow English audio. Very basic. Very calm. And after 2 minutes, I turned it off. Not because I didn't understand, but because I didn't want to feel anything. Language carries emotion. When you understand, even a little, it touches something inside. And I was already full. There's a term in neuroscience called emotional bandwidth. It's like internet speed for your feelings. When too many emotional apps are running, stress, responsibility, uncertainty, your bandwidth drops. Learning doesn't stop. But it slows. And forcing it only creates resistance. That I realized I had been treating English like a task, not a companion. I must practice. I should improve. Those words sound responsible, but they feel heavy. Just like in marriage, when love turns into duty, warmth fades. The brain doesn't respond well to pressure disguised as discipline. Researchers have found that language learning improves when the nervous system feels safe. Not excited. Safe. That means slow pace. Familiar topics. Gentle repetition. And most importantly, emotional relevance. When English connects to your real life, your brain opens the door more easily. So I changed one small thing. I stopped studying. I started narrating my life in very simple English. In my head. While driving. While washing dishes. I feel tired today. The road is long. I don't know the answer yet. No grammar rules. No correction. Just meaning, something interesting happened. My chest felt lighter. Not smarter. Lighter. Because I wasn't performing. I was expressing. Emotional fatigue doesn't want more input. It wants release. And language, when used gently, can become that release. This is why so many people quit learning English when life gets hard. Not because English is hard, but because life already is. Adding force to a tired system feels like punishment. Removing force feels like permission. That week taught me this. When your heart is tired, your brain doesn't need more discipline. It needs kindness. Slow listening. Slow speaking. Like a friend sitting next to you, not a teacher standing above you. In the end, emotional fatigue didn't mean I was failing at English. It meant English needed to walk with me, not push me forward. The Unplanned Road Trip. The road trip was not an idea. It was a reaction. One of those moments where staying still felt heavier than moving, even without a plan. That Saturday morning, my wife looked at me and said, "Let's just drive." No destination. No schedule. Just the road. In America, that sentence carries a strange kind of hope. We got into the car and started driving west. The city slowly disappeared. Buildings turned into open land. My mind, still noisy at first, began to quiet. Movement does that to the brain. Studies show that gentle forward motion reduces mental rumination. It tells your nervous system, you are going somewhere. You are safe. At first, we didn't talk much. Music played softly. English songs I had heard 100 times, but never really listened to. This time, I caught small phrases. Not the meaning. The feeling. Rhythm before understanding. That's how the brain likes to learn, from the outside in. The unplanned part mattered. When there is no goal, there is no pressure. No pressure means less fear. Less fear means more openness. It's the same reason children learn language faster than adults. They are not trying to sound smart. They are just responding to the world. As miles passed, something shifted between us. Our shoulders relaxed. Breathing slowed. Silence became comfortable instead of tense. There's research showing that shared novel experiences strengthen emotional bonds. New roads create new neural connections, not just in the brain, but between people. At a gas station in a small town, we bought coffee. The cashier spoke fast. I didn't catch everything. Normally, that would frustrate me. But that day, I smiled and said, "Sorry, slow please." Simple English. honest English. And it was enough. No embarrassment. No apology for my level. Back in the car, my wife laughed and said, "You sound calm today." She was right. I wasn't trying to prove anything. Not as a husband. Not as an English learner. I was just participating. This is something road trips teach you. Progress doesn't always look like achievement. Sometimes it looks like alignment. Your body, your mind, your words moving at the same speed. Psychologists call this state coherence. When internal systems stop fighting each other. When effort and emotion match. That's when learning sticks. That's when conversations open naturally that we didn't solve our problems on that drive. We didn't make big decisions. But we created space. And space is powerful. Space lets meaning arrive without force. By the time the sun started to set, I realized something simple and uncomfortable. Planning had not protected us. Slowing down had. The unplanned road didn't fix our marriage or my English. It reminded both how to breathe again, and sometimes, that's all you need before real change can begin. Silence inside the car. Silence has a bad reputation. People think silence means distance, boredom, or danger. But that day in the car, silence felt different. It wasn't empty. It was full. Full of thoughts settling down. Full of emotions finally catching up. For a long time, my wife and I drove without speaking. Normally, that would make me uncomfortable. My brain would rush to fill the space. Say something useful. Say something right. But this time, I let the silence stay. And surprisingly, nothing broke. There's a psychological reason for this. When two people feel safe, silence doesn't trigger threat. It becomes a shared pause. The nervous system shifts from defense mode to rest mode. Heart rate slows. Muscles relax. In that state, the brain becomes more receptive to language, to emotion, to connection. Inside that quiet car, I noticed small details. The sound of tires on the road. The way sunlight moved across the dashboard. These moments sound insignificant, but they anchor you in the present. And presence is where both love and learning happen. Silence is also important for language processing. Studies show that the brain needs pauses to consolidate new sounds and meanings. When you listen to English non-stop without rest, comprehension drops. The same happens in relationships. Constant talking without listening creates noise, not closeness. At one point, I thought about all the times I avoided silence in English. Filling gaps with and, afraid of sounding slow. But slowness is not weakness. Slowness gives your brain time to choose meaning over panic. Eventually, my wife broke the silence. She said, "I miss us talking without fixing things." That sentence was soft. It didn't demand a response. It invited one. And because there was no rush, I answered honestly. Slowly. In simple words. Not perfect words. "I'm tired," I said. "I want to do things right. I forget to just be here. That was it. No speech. No solution. Just truth. Silence before and after. And it felt right. Neuroscience calls this co-regulation. When two nervous systems calm each other through presence. No advice. No correction. Just shared stillness. This is why conversations late at night often feel deeper. The world is quieter. The brain listens better. For English learners, this matters a lot. If you always rush to speak correctly, you never let your real voice appear. Pausing is part of fluency. Silence is part of communication. That day taught me that silence is not the enemy of progress. It is the space where progress decides its next move. Sometimes, the most important sentence is the one you wait before saying. Slow English, slow healing. Healing rarely speaks loudly. It whispers. And it almost always speaks slowly. After that long silence in the car, I noticed something gentle happening inside me. I wasn't trying to explain myself anymore. I wasn't rehearsing sentences in my head. My English, like my emotions, slowed down on its own. That night, back at home, I caught myself saying very simple sentences out loud. Not to practice. Not to improve. Just to exist. Today was quiet. The drive helped me. I feel closer now. Basic English. Almost childlike. And yet, those sentences carried more truth than anything complex I had said all week. There is a reason for this. In neuroscience, emotional regulation and language production share overlapping brain regions. When emotions are intense, language becomes fragmented. When emotions calm, language flows more naturally. So when you slow your emotions, you slow your English, and paradoxically, it becomes clearer. Many learners think fluency means speed. Faster speaking. Faster listening. But the brain disagrees. Research shows that comprehension increases when speech is slightly slower than normal. Not exaggerated. Just calm. This gives the auditory cortex time to process sounds and meaning together. Instead of panicking and translating word by word, the same principle applies to relationships. When conversations slow down, defensiveness drops. Curiosity returns. You stop reacting and start responding. That week, my wife and I began talking in shorter sentences. Softer voices. Longer pauses. It felt awkward at first. Like learning a new accent in our own marriage. One morning, while making coffee, I said, "I'm learning to listen again." She smiled and replied, "Me too." 2 short sentences. No drama. No explanation. But something shifted. Because we were no longer trying to win understanding. We were allowing it. This is what slow English teaches you. You don't need advanced words to say something real. You need space. When you remove pressure, the brain stops protecting itself and starts exploring. That's when memory forms. That's when confidence grows quietly. There's also a biological detail most people don't know. Slow, rhythmic speech activates the parasympathetic nervous system, the part responsible for rest and connection. That's why calm voices feel safe. That's why bedtime stories work. That's why slow English feels strangely comforting, that I stopped correcting myself constantly. I let small mistakes pass. I focused on meaning, not performance. And just like that, English stopped feeling like a test. It felt like a companion walking beside me. Healing doesn't ask for perfection. It asks for presence. And presence speaks slowly that in the end, I learned something unexpected. Fluency is not about sounding native. It's about sounding honest, at a pace your heart can keep up with. Science of small moments. Big changes make good headlines. Small moments do the real work. That week taught me that healing in marriage and progress in English don't come from dramatic breakthroughs. They come from tiny, almost invisible shifts that your brain quietly records. There's a concept in behavioral science called the aggregation of marginal gains. It means small improvements, repeated consistently, create massive change over time. Your brain loves this approach because it feels safe. No shock. No threat. Just gentle progress. That I started noticing these small moments everywhere. My wife touching my arm while I spoke. Me waiting 1 extra second before responding. Listening to English audio for 5 minutes instead of 30. These moments didn't feel productive. But they felt doable. And that matters more than motivation. Neuroscientists explain that habits form faster when effort is low and emotion is positive. When learning feels heavy, the brain resists. When learning feels neutral or slightly pleasant, the brain opens. That's why forcing yourself to study for hours often fails, while 5 calm minutes every day quietly succeeds. The same rule applies to love. Grand gestures fade quickly. But repeated micro-connections rewire trust. Eye contact. A nod. A shared smile. These moments release oxytocin, the bonding hormone. They tell the nervous system, you are not alone. And a calm nervous system learns faster. That I tested this with English. Instead of chasing new vocabulary, I repeated familiar phrases connected to my life. I'm thinking. I need time. That makes sense. These phrases became anchors. When stress appeared, my brain reached for them naturally. Language stopped feeling foreign. It became functional. This is how children learn. Not through effort, but through repetition in safe environments. Adults forget this because we think learning must be hard to be real. But the brain doesn't care about effort. It cares about survival and comfort. One night, my wife said something simple. This week feels lighter. That sentence stayed with me. Because nothing big had changed. No solution. No plan. Just many small moments stacked together. Psychologists call this emotional accumulation. You don't feel progress in the moment. You feel it when you look back. The same is true with English. One day, you suddenly understand a sentence you couldn't before. Not because you studied harder, but because your brain was ready. Small moments don't demand attention. They don't announce success. But they build the foundation quietly, like roots underground that if you want your English to grow, or your relationships to heal, stop asking for big energy. Ask for small honesty. One sentence. One pause. One breath. In the end, change didn't arrive like a wave. It arrived like a morning, slow, light, and easy to miss if you weren't paying attention. One honest conversation. Honest conversations rarely happen when you plan them. They happen when the pressure drops low enough for truth to breathe. Ours came late one evening, not as a serious talk, but as a quiet moment that refused to stay small. We were sitting in the living room. No TV. No phones. Just tired bodies and calm minds. I didn't prepare what to say. And that was the key. Prepared words protect you. Honest words expose you. I said, slowly, this week scared me. Simple English. No explanation yet. My wife looked at me and waited. That pause mattered. When someone waits without interrupting, your nervous system relaxes. You feel safe enough to continue. I'm afraid of losing us, I said. Not dramatic. Just true. She didn't fix it. She didn't defend herself. She said, I felt lonely too. 2 people. 2 sentences. No blame. No past stories. Just the present. Psychology calls this emotional attunement. When both sides focus on understanding instead of winning. This kind of conversation lowers cortisol, the stress hormone, and increases trust. It's not magic. It's biology. I noticed something interesting. The simpler my English became, the deeper the conversation went. Short sentences forced clarity. There was no space to hide behind fancy words. Meaning came first. Many English learners fear serious conversations because they think they don't have enough language. But often, they have exactly the right amount. Complexity can distance. Simplicity invites connection. We talked about fear. About expectations. About how trying to be strong sometimes means being silent in the wrong way. And we spoke slowly. Paused often. Let emotions catch up to words. This conversation didn't solve everything. But it changed the direction. Research shows that direction matters more than speed in relationships. The same is true in learning. If you are facing the right way, slow steps still move you forward. After that night, English felt different again. It wasn't a skill I was chasing. It was a tool I was using to stay close. And that shift changed everything. Honest conversations don't require perfect language. They require courage to speak simply and space to listen fully. Sometimes, one true sentence does more work than 1,000 practiced ones. Learning without forcing. Forcing looks productive. It feels responsible. But forcing is often fear wearing a productivity mask. That week, after our honest conversation, I noticed how much force I had been using, in my marriage, and in my English learning. I was trying to control outcomes. Better communication. Better pronunciation. Better future. Control feels safe, but it tightens everything. Muscles, breath, attention. And when the body tightens, learning slows down. There's a well-known concept in psychology called reactance. When people feel pressured, even by themselves, they resist. The brain pushes back. That's why strict study schedules often fail, and why relationships suffer when "we need to talk" becomes a threat instead of an invitation. That I stopped telling myself, "I must practice English today." Instead, I asked, "Do I feel open right now?" If the answer was no, I didn't push. I waited. That waiting wasn't laziness. It was regulation. Surprisingly, when I removed force, curiosity returned. I found myself listening to English naturally, short clips, familiar voices, slow stories. Not because I had to. Because I wanted to understand. The same thing happened in my marriage. I stopped trying to fix moods. I focused on staying present. Listening without planning a response. Letting moments unfold without steering them. Neuroscience supports this approach. Learning improves when dopamine, the curiosity chemical, is present. Force reduces dopamine. Choice increases it. When you choose to learn, the brain marks the experience as rewarding. This is why children learn languages through play, not pressure. Adults forget how powerful permission is. Permission to be slow. Permission to be imperfect. Permission to stop. One afternoon, I said out loud, "Today, I don't want to improve. I just want to understand." That sentence changed my posture. Shoulders dropped. Breathing deepened. And ironically, understanding came more easily. Learning without forcing doesn't mean no structure. It means flexible structure. Gentle rhythms instead of rigid rules. Listening when energy is available. Resting when it's not. Marriage works the same way. Love grows when it's allowed, not demanded. That week in the US taught me that effort is not the enemy. Force is. When you replace force with attention, both language and relationships begin to move again. Progress doesn't need a whip. It needs a direction and a little trust. A new way to practice English. After that week, I realized something quietly powerful. I didn't need a new method. I needed a new relationship with English. Not as a subject. Not as a test. But as part of my daily life, especially inside my family. That I started practicing English the same way I was rebuilding connection at home, through presence, not pressure. I spoke English when it naturally fit the moment. Not long conversations. Just small, honest sentences. While cooking, I said, "The smell is good." While driving, "The road feels open." Before sleeping, "Today was heavy, but okay." These sentences were simple, but they were real. And real language sticks better than perfect language. Linguists explain this through contextual learning. The brain remembers language better when it's tied to emotion and physical experience. Vocabulary learned in isolation fades quickly. Vocabulary used in real moments stays. That I also changed how I listened. Instead of searching for every word, I listened for tone, mood, Intention. Just like in marriage. You don't listen to respond. You listen to understand. Meaning comes before accuracy. This reduced anxiety immediately. My brain stopped scanning for mistakes and started noticing patterns. Repeated phrases. Familiar rhythms. This is how fluency quietly forms, not through effort, but through exposure with safety.at home. My wife noticed the change. She said, "You sound more like yourself when you speak English now." That comment mattered more than any test score. Because identity is the deepest level of language learning, psychological research shows that when learners feel authentic, motivation becomes intrinsic. You don't need reminders. You return naturally. English becomes something you use, not something you prepare for. I also allowed myself to mix languages in my head. No guilt. No correction. Code switching is not failure. It's a sign of a flexible, adaptive brain. Many bilingual families live this way every day. This new way of practicing didn't feel like progress at first. But weeks later, I noticed something surprising. I understood more without trying. I spoke with less fear. My sentences weren't faster, but they were steadier. That's the goal most learners never hear about. Stability. Not speed. English, like love, grows best when it's woven into life, quietly, imperfectly, and honestly. What America taught me. Living in the United States teaches you things slowly, if you let it. Not the loud lessons about success or money. The quiet ones about space, distance, and choice. That week, America taught me something I didn't expect, that freedom is not about doing more. It's about choosing less, on purpose. In this country, roads are wide. Conversations are often polite and short. People respect personal space. At first, this feels cold. But over time, you realize something important. Space is not absence. Space is permission. Permission to think. To feel. To decide at your own pace. This changed how I saw both marriage and English. I stopped trying to fill every gap. I allowed pauses. In conversations. In learning. In myself, American culture values independence, but what I learned was interdependence. You walk your own path, but you don't rush others. You speak when ready. You listen when needed. That balance reduced pressure inside me. I noticed how Americans often say, "Take your time." Not as politeness, but as a value. And I finally took it seriously. Language learning doesn't expire. Love doesn't follow a deadline. That week showed me that growth doesn't come from intensity. It comes from alignment. When your environment, your nervous system, and your intentions point in the same direction, America didn't fix my problems. But it showed me that slowing down is not falling behind. Returning changed. When we came back home after that unplanned week, nothing on the outside looked different. The same kitchen. The same sofa. The same calendar on the wall reminding us of responsibilities we couldn't avoid. Life didn't reset. It waited, but inside me, something had softened that I didn't wake up with a new personality or sudden confidence. I woke up calmer. And calm changes everything. When the nervous system is calm, the brain stops asking, "Am I failing?" and starts asking, "What do I notice?" I noticed that my English no longer felt like a judge watching me. It felt like a quiet tool in my pocket. Available when needed. Silent when not. I spoke less, but with more intention. I listened more, without panic. And somehow, understanding grew, not fast, but steady. My marriage changed in the same way. We didn't promise anything dramatic. We didn't set rules or schedules. We just stayed a little longer in moments. A few more seconds of eye contact. One more honest sentence before sleep. Less fixing. More being. Science explains this beautifully. Long-term change happens when behavior aligns with emotional safety. Not motivation. Not discipline. Safety. When the brain feels safe, it learns. When the heart feels safe, it opens. That week taught me that learning English is not separate from living life. It reflects how you treat yourself. If you rush yourself, English feels stressful. If you allow yourself to be human, English becomes human too. I stopped asking, "How fast can I improve?" I started asking, "Can I stay present today?" And presence turned out to be the best teacher. If you are listening to this and you feel tired of starting again, tired of plans that don't last, tired of feeling behind, I want you to hear this slowly. You are not broken, you are not lazy, you are overloaded, and overload doesn't need pressure. It needs gentleness. Learning English, like love, survives through small daily honesty. One sentence you understand. One sentence you dare to say. One moment where you don't quit. The unplanned road didn't give me answers. It gave me permission to slow down, permission to speak simply, permission to keep going without forcing. And maybe that's what you need too, not a new plan, just a kinder pace.